Welcome and thank you all for joining us today. We're very happy to be back with a special regional specific edition of our COVID update webinar. We will begin shortly, but before that, I'll make a few technical notes about the GoToWebinar platform and how to use it. On the webinar panel, this is the blue or orange flower icon on your screen. You'll see a section called Handouts. This is where you can open and download today's presentation, follow along, or save the information for later. There's also a questions pane where you can enter your questions for our panelists today. We try to answer as many questions either through the chat box direct back to you or live during our Q&A session at the end. Following the webinar, please take a moment to complete a short survey letting us know your experience today. As well, you'll receive a recording of today's session by email tomorrow afternoon. And with that, I will now introduce Laura Jones, our Executive Vice President and Chief Strategic Officer. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Alexa, and good afternoon, everyone in our Ontario members. We're really excited today to bring you I believe this is our 39th version of our regular webinars that we've put on since COVID started. We've been keeping you up to date on the latest developments with respect to federal programs and policies and trying to make sure we're answering as many questions as we can, as well as giving you a little bit of an insight into some of the advocacy that we're doing on your behalf. And on our webinar a couple of weeks ago, it was suggested that doing some more regional deep dives would be a great idea. So that's what we're doing this week. So we're focusing exclusively on Ontario provincial programs on this webinar. Well, we'll give you a little update on some of the federal stuff first, but then we're going to do a deep dive on Ontario. So I'm really happy to be joined today by Ryan Mallow, who's our Director of Provincial Affairs in Ontario, and Alicia's also joining us. She's one of our business counselors. Many of you are familiar with Rachel and Brendan, who join regularly. Really happy to have Alicia with us today. And of course, Corinne, my very capable co-pilot on these webinars, and I are both here with you as well. I want to say a special welcome. We've got some new folks joining us for these webinars for the first time, so a special welcome to you. And for your benefit, I will, on the next slide, just let you know that our website is constantly updated with questions that we get from business owners, both through our helplines and also through these webinars. So if you're looking for information, this is a good place to go, CFIB-FCEI /COVID-19. It's pretty easy to find. And of course, we have a commitment to all of our members to keep that up to date. In addition to the website, sometimes you need to go back and forth in real time with someone, and that's a more efficient way to get things done. And if that's the case, please don't hesitate to call our helpline, and the number is there. We'll also be putting it up at the very end of the webinar as well. So if we go to the next slide, we like to start with a few quotes, a few inspirational quotes. And so these are the ones we chose for the week. You know, I don't know anyone who's not struggling. Obviously, some are struggling and having a tougher time than others. And certainly small business owners are on the front lines of those who have been deeply, deeply affected by the pandemic, especially in Ontario, where the restrictions have been tougher and have been longer lasting than in most of the other provinces. So a couple of quotes here. The one I like the best, I think, off this list is that people often say motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing. That's why we recommend it daily. So just making sure that you're getting your daily dose of some kind of motivation. We definitely all need it right now. On the next slide, we're going to cover what's new, and I'm going to bring Corinne up in a moment to talk about federally what's new. But again, as I said, we're going to mainly focus on the provincial restrictions and programs. And I know there was some breaking news as of I think that press conference just ended. So Ryan is up to speed on all of that, and we'll tackle that as well. And then we'll get to as many of your questions as we can. Please feel free to type them in the question box, and then we'll be tackling as many of your questions as we can today. The next slide, I just wanted to introduce a little, Corinne started this a few webinars ago, just finding some good cartoons with some maybe some COVID humor. So this one kind of made me laugh. about anxiety, so maybe it'll give you a giggle. And on the next slide, just a little bit of, I just wanted to, you know, the headlines are just screaming with all the bad news, and there's lots of bad news, particularly in Ontario around restrictions. We'll get to that in a minute. But, you know, as we get closer to the finish line on this thing, or getting back to some sense of having our lives back, vaccines are an important part of that. And I just wanted to share that, you know, this is as of 2 days ago. As of yesterday, we were closer to the 17 million mark across Canada. I know in Ontario, you're over 50% of your eligible population has been vaccinated. And, you know, that is going to make a difference. We've seen that in other countries, how things move quickly once you get to a certain mark with the vaccination. So there is some good news out there as well, even if it's not screaming at you from the headline of the newspaper. And with that, Corinne, I think this is where I bring you up, and you're going to walk us through a few of the new items federally, and then we'll introduce Ryan in a few minutes.
Thanks, Laura. And hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Welcome to those who are new, and those of you, welcome back, who have been with us before. Just a few quick updates federally to make sure that it's been a couple weeks since we've last been able to give you a bit of an update, though if you were able to join us for a webinar earlier this week with the Minister Joly, you would have had a bit of that. But the federal budget, which was out on April 19th, the bill associated with that, there's usually 2 bills in a year. This is the spring one, and then there's another one usually in the fall, but the spring one has been tabled, and it includes a lot of the important pieces that we wanted to make sure are going to be implemented. The first and foremost here, of course, is the rent subsidy and the wage subsidy extensions from June to September. Those are going to be part of the budget bill. Just so if you want more details on what that looks like, what the calculations are, because as you know, starting in July, those amounts of the subsidy will start to come down. In the appendix of this presentation, and that is attached to this webinar, you can find a PDF file, and at the appendix of that, you will see more details about the extensions for the wage subsidy and the rent subsidy in there, as well as a few other details from the budget. But I do want to highlight that that was one of the key pieces of the budget. Also, there's going to be a hiring incentive that's going to start in June as well. A bit more detail on that as well in that particular appendix about what we know. However, some of these program details are not going to be really clear until that budget bill has passed sometime, probably in early June. Doesn't mean that those particular initiatives will not go ahead. They will go ahead, even if the budget bill is not quite at the end of its sort of process to be implemented. But those details, some of those details may be only ironed out between now and the next few weeks, but those two we know quite a bit about already. And then there's, of course, the immediate expensing. That was another big piece of the budget, among many other things, that is part of this budget bill. That means you can expense up to $1.5 million in the year of purchase for the next 2 or 3 years. I think it's till 2023. And if you are looking at making some capital purchases, it doesn't include real estate, however, but any other type of capital purchase, you can use this immediate expensing sort of provision that's been introduced and is going to be part of the budget bill. But we'll have more information once it goes through the whole process, and we'll certainly be sharing that with you as we know more. And any feedback you have for us on any of those provisions, please tell us. For example, we know a lot of folks are starting to get a little worried about whether pulling back on the subsidy as early as beginning of July is maybe too early still. So given all the restrictions that we're still going to hear about, that is something we're starting to hear more. So if that is something that's on your mind, please tell us so we can sort of see how big a deal this is for so many businesses right now. And if it is, of course, we'll push the government to think about maybe not starting to reduce it come July. Secondly, I wanted to talk a little bit about the CEBA expansion. So Canada Emergency Business Account, as you know, there was the $40,000 originally, and then they added the extra $20,000. There are a small group of folks out there who still not been able to get that expansion, though they did apply for it back in December. They were found to have had a bit of a discrepancy in their applications. For example, maybe the CRA business number wasn't quite the same number that CRA had, or some other small discrepancy. And I know that they've been told they'll have an opportunity to correct this, but that opportunity still hasn't come. I want you to know that you're not alone. There are actually a few thousand of you out there in that particular category. We continue to raise it with the Export Development Canada that's running this particular program and the importance of getting this out there. We will continue to do so. So I just want you to know that we know it's still an issue. We know it hasn't been resolved, and we want you to know that we are putting pressure as much as we can. All we can tell you right now is that make sure the financial institution knows that you're still waiting for them to get back to you about the CEBA plan. We're hoping it's going to be in the next few days or the next couple of weeks. I have no idea. We thought that 2 months ago, so I don't want to sort of raise expectations, but every time we talk to them, they say it's close. So I feel the frustration, I share the frustration, and so we're going to continue to do that. If you'd like to share your story, if you haven't done so already, please do. The more information and stories that we have about the impact of these types of delays will really help us in putting the pressure on the government to move more quickly on this.
And Corinne, I just wanted to mention for those of you who may have missed the fantastic webinar that Corinne did on the budget and what was in the budget, that although we didn't want to go through those slides again in detail on this webinar because many of you didn't miss it, but in case you missed it or if you want to look at those slides again, they are in the appendix, so that does a little bit of a deeper dive in terms of
I mentioned that already. Yep.
Use formula. I just want to make sure people catch that. Thanks.
Absolutely, for sure. Thank you. Okay, going to the next slide. So on the highly affected sector credit availability program, we just wanted to touch base on this one quickly because it is another program that's out there should you think that you maybe need a little bit more funding. It is only for businesses that have seen a more than a 50% drop in revenue over the last within 3 months over the last 8 months before you apply. But there are some issues that have come up for those that have been trying to use it that we just wanted to clarify that you may want to be aware of when you're starting to apply for this particular program. BDC, who runs this program in conjunction with the financial institution, so you do have to apply through your financial institution, but BDC has been actually quite helpful in helping to fix some of these issues that have already been cropping up with our members and their financial institutions around this particular loan program. For example, it is a loan program that is at a 4% interest rate. You have a 10-year term. It's only based on the viability of your business pre-pandemic, not what's happened during the pandemic. It also does not require a personal guarantee. Now, we've had many instances where people are being asked for information that's personal, and sometimes even asked to provide a personal guarantee. BDC has reconfirmed over and over again, you do not need to actually provide a personal guarantee. The bank may ask you for some personal information though, so just to sort of check a few things, but there should be no personal guarantee. That's one. Two, a couple of banks have been suggesting that the term loan is only for 5 years. In fact, within the program, it's up to 10 years. Now, if you want to work out a shorter time frame, you can do that with a financial institution, but the official timeline is 10 years. Thirdly, we've also had business owners who've gone in wanting to maybe get a loan that's over the $250,000 mark, which is the highest segment. And that means you are also scrutinized a lot more in terms of the viability of your business and the likelihood of default. If you're not eligible under that category, some banks aren't telling you that you may have to do less in order to get a lesser amount of money. So there are 3 segments which are outlined on the slide here of funding, each of which have a different level of scrutiny in terms of what they're expecting from you to provide in terms of the viability of the business. So the lesser amount of money you have, the less amount of information they're going to ask for. So if you're not eligible at the amount that you initially want to get, and maybe there's a possibility you could go a bit lower. So we're sort of making sure that you ask for that option because the banks we're discovering are not always offering those options. And finally, the information that's requested from the FI is only going to be really about, again, depending on what segment that you're in, and it's around the probability of default. And that could be based on maybe what you've done on a previous loan. The only other information they're really going to look for is any information you've already provided through the wage subsidy or the rent subsidy. So those are just some key things we want to sort of clarify on the HASCAP loan if you're considering actually going for it. Again, our counselors have lots of good information. Feel free to give us a call and the number's there as a reminder. So if we go to the next slide, we might bring Laura back on this one, but we do have a rent petition. So Laura, if you wanted to sort of give us an overview on that one.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I know that there are many, we're fighting on many fronts right now in terms of fixing the programs. And I just wanted to mention one more time the rent petition. is up now for those of you who are shut out of rent relief for various reasons. If you own your property or there are various reasons you may be shut out of it, there's this petition you can sign. And I also wanted to just see, you can see the petition is there, and then there's a letter on to the right of that, and then a tweet on to the right of that letter, just to give you a sense of what we do once we collect your information, that we're then pulling that into letters. We've already sent multiple letters to the finance minister on this, but what we're going to do with these petitions is start really targeting the MPs. So once we get some comments, we make them anonymous, of course, but we are including, these are your constituents who are telling us this about rent relief, and we try and get the backbenchers engaged. And also, the more agitation we get around these issues, the more successful we are. And then, of course, using it in our media and our social media. So if you're on those platforms, sharing, retweeting, that's very, very helpful to get more engagement. So just a sense of what we do with your feedback. And with that, I want to bring Ryan up, I think, and we're going to now switch our attention to what's been going on in Ontario. We sometimes say unterrible, Ryan, and I'll let you take it from here, and then we'll be back in a few minutes to take questions.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here as always. Actually, there's a lot of stuff happening in Ontario right now. It's actually happening in real time. So I'm going to do my best. I've got an eye on one of my other phones here, just keeping an eye on what's coming in. But information is changing. So we'll get right to the immediate news. Less than an hour ago, Premier Ford announced that the current shutdown position that we are in Ontario is going to extend through June 2nd. I want to be clear here because the Premier was being clear. That's not going to be lifted on June 2nd. That is going to be extended and reassessed on June 2nd. In fact, he indicated that outdoor recreation, like golf courses, are probably what's going to be allowed to open at that point, and the government will look for a broader reopening plan moving forward from there. What he promised was a more normal July, August, which is certainly not the news that I think any of you, and certainly not that I wanted to hear. As you can see from our provincial restrictions slide, and we're using BC as a comparator because BC has a pretty big population, has major urban centers, and yet has remained pretty open. Ontario is not only the most closed jurisdiction in Canada, it's not only the most closed jurisdiction in North America, it is among the most closed jurisdictions in the world. In fact, if you're in the city of Toronto like me and are looking for a haircut, much like me, it has been 172 consecutive days as of today since a hairdresser was open. By June 2nd, indoor dining for restaurants in the city will have been closed a total of 362 days during the pandemic. It's an incredible amount of time, incredibly difficult for small business owners like yourself to go through. And I will note that there was no announcement about a third round of funding for the Small Business Support Grant or additional funding to help businesses get through this lockdown. That was promised for 28 days and is now going to be a minimum of 56 this third wave around. Now, the other bit I want to address here is we are getting a lot of questions coming in asking what happens when we do come out of this shutdown? What do we reopen to? What is it going to look like? In all honesty, based on the conversations that I've been having with government ministers' offices, they're not 100% sure. It sounds like we're going to go back to the color-coded framework. Were that to happen today for most of Ontario, that means going from shutdown to the gray lockdown zone. Again, I know the optics aren't great there. Going from shutdown to lockdown, it doesn't sound good. But as you can see from this chart, the way that the government has modified the gray zone, it actually is a lot more open. You do start to see patios reopen for restaurants. You do start to see personal services like hairdressers, eyebrows, piercing, anything that doesn't require a face mask. It is allowed to reopen with a capacity limit. Retail businesses will be back open with a capacity limit. Outdoor fitness is another area that will be back open. And then as we transition down into the red control zone, we get much more broadly reopened. Social interactions start coming back. Indoor activities start to come back as well. So there is some hope around the corner. However, these restrictions just announced this afternoon are going to be in place at minimum through June 2nd. In the meantime, we are going to continue to fight for the government to come up not only with a reopening plan, but a quicker reopening plan. We want to see them leverage not just the vaccine rollout, but also the rapid testing technology, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and find a way for businesses to start seeing some customers sooner, because as we know from our data that we're collecting, it is very difficult out there in Ontario right now. And the reality is the longer this goes, the harder it's going to be. Next slide, please. So on that note, in terms of new things that we do have a provincial sick days program that is now in place. I want to underscore that because it happened very quickly. There was an announcement of a bill, there was a bill, and the bill passed all 3 readings and achieved royal assent within about a 72-hour period, but that is in place. So if you are a business that does not traditionally offer sick days, all of your employees are entitled to 3 paid sick days. Up front, it is the business that is required to pay for them. There is going to be a reimbursement. It's going to be up to $200 a day from the WSIB. However, that process is not up and running yet. There will be a portal. It is coming. We know they're working on it. But again, this happened very quickly. The WSIB was perhaps not informed as quickly as one would have hoped. So that portal is not ready yet. That being said, just because you cannot access it as an employer does not mean your employees aren't entitled to it. Also, for those businesses that do offer paid sick days, this gets a little bit tricky. So the general rule is if you offer sick days and they've all been used up by April 19th, your employees are entitled to these additional 3. If you're a business that offers, say, 1 or 2 sick days traditionally, then your employees have access to however many makes 3. So if you offer 1 paid sick day a year, you have access to 2 additional ones through this program. If you offer 2 days, it's 1 additional one through this program. The other thing that I want to be clear on here is if you do have an existing 6 days program and the employees have not used up all of their days, you are not to use this program to pay for your existing days. So if you have a program, say you had 5 paid sick days that was already in place, you have an employee that hasn't used any, if they start to use some now to say go get vaccinated or perhaps they've been told to self-isolate, whatever it may be, you cannot then go to the WSIB and apply for these days. This is strictly for employees that have no pre-existing coverage or have used up their pre-existing coverage. I know we were getting a number of questions in, and my colleague Alicia Lorio is on the call as well to help answer some of those. I will note that the 3 paid days are strictly limited to the paid portion. That doesn't mean an employee can't take more time off. There's a federal program that's available when it comes to paid time, but the infectious disease emergency leave that offers full protection for any employee that has to take time off for COVID-related reasons, either they have it themselves, they may have it, need to get tested, or a family member has it, that protected leave still remains in place, which means from the employer's standpoint, if the employee has to miss work, there's nothing you can do when it comes to termination or any kind of penalties on there. It is considered job protected leave. Next slide, please. Over on the grant program, so I'm going to talk about 3. The first one does not exist anymore in that they're not taking new applications. However, I would say it is still the #1 call that we're receiving in Ontario, and I know a couple of you guys have asked in the questions in the chat box already, is what is going on with the Ontario Small Business Support Grant. So we are hearing that there are a number of businesses that are still stuck in application limbo, where they haven't heard either way. We have a number of businesses who have been approved for payment but haven't received anything. And we have a number of businesses who have received the first payment, were promised the second, it is coming automatically, but have not received it yet. So we have been flagging this with the government, and I'm not kidding when I say it. We are flagging this with the government daily. We are on the line with them trying to get this sorted out. Payments are going out. That side of it is encouraging. We are hearing from members who have been waiting for weeks or in some cases months on end, now starting to see their payments. The government is also ramping up staff on this side. However, I do want to warn, it remains very, very slow going. And I know how frustrating it is to call into that hotline and try to get a straight answer out of anybody. I know how frustrating it is to email into that address and try to get just a response. I believe the record I've heard from a member is 56 emails that have gone entirely unresponded to. I do want to note, if you find yourself in one of those 3 categories, either you're waiting on approval, you are have been approved for money but haven't received it, or you've only received half of your payments, we do have an escalation process that we can help use. What I strongly encourage you to do is call into our BR line, speak with one of our counselors, and the information that we'll need you to have ready is have your authorization code and your phone number. Those are the two main things we need, and that's what we can point government to help speed up that process a little bit. We are finding some success with this, but again, it is slow going. We are talking about a program that was introduced in January, and it is May, and money still hasn't flowed for a lot of businesses. So we are continuing to keep the pressure up on that side. I will say on this, especially in light of the restrictions announcements today, we are also calling for an immediate third payment to be introduced, as well as a much broader eligibility for the program. So those businesses like dry cleaners, caterers, chiropractors, and other regulated and unregulated health professionals, theater companies, number of different kinds of businesses that were shut out of the program should have access to this, especially given how long this third wave has now dragged on. Next slide, please. The other program, or the program that currently exists and is available online right now, is the Property Tax and Energy Rebate Grant. This is a fairly straightforward program. You go into the Provincial application portal and you submit your electricity or heating bill and or your property tax bill, and the government will rebate it. Want to note with this program that you can apply for it as long as you've been in a zone that has been in either red, gray, or entirely shut down or lockdown, and you're a business that was impacted by being in red, gray, shut down, or lockdown. If you've applied for it before, you can absolutely apply for it again. It does continue throughout the entire time that you're under these orders. And I will say at bare minimum, we have been stuck in this third iteration of the province-wide shutdown since April 8th. So April and May will for sure be covered. These programs are also scaled to the time that you were spent in these zones. So if you spent, say, half a month in the gray zone or half a month in lockdown, you can get half a month's worth rebate on these programs as well. So that is one that we are strongly encouraging use, namely because this is it has been the only program that has been available, but also we know that there is still significant money behind the program. It's a little bit underutilized. So if you have property tax bills, if you have energy bills, make sure that you are applying for this program. And again, it's retroactive to any time that you have spent in those red, gray, or shut down zones. Next program, please. So this program is a little bit of hot breaking news. So the Ontario Tourism and Hospitality Support Grant is now live. If you go to the link, same portal as the energy and property tax rebate, businesses who are eligible can now apply through it. So again, I'm getting this a little bit in real time, but we do have some additional eligibility criteria and information. First and foremost, if you're a business that has received the Ontario Small Business Support Grant, you are not going to be eligible for the Tourism and Hospitality Support Grant. It is specifically for businesses that were not eligible for the Ontario Support Grant. Second, in similar application processes, you have to have fewer than 99 employees as of April 30th, 2021, and you have to have a 20% or greater revenue decline. Now, unlike the Small Business Support Grant, which was month over month for most businesses, April 2020 over April 2019, this grant is going to take the average of a 3-month period, your choice, in 2020, over a 3-month period, over the same 3-month period in 2019. That is how they're going to do the revenue calculation. That part of it is encouraging. We know that the April over April restriction in the other grant actually shutted a lot of businesses out. So we are encouraged that the government did hear that bit of feedback and did make that change. Now, newer businesses can still apply for this if they are among the eligible businesses list. However, if you are operating or acquired after July 1st, 2019, you're going to receive a set amount as opposed to an amount based on your revenue drop. And it's going to be the minimum. It's going to be the $10,000. So on the process side, it'll be a bit smoother. You're going to check a box to say that's when you're operating and just go from there. But on the financial side, the help is not going to be as much as those businesses that were operating or acquired before July 1st, 2019. I'll make sure that there is a list circulated and available on CFIB's website, but it is very much restricted to businesses in the tourism sphere. We're talking about amusement parks and water parks, bed and breakfast, cottage and cabins, fireworks businesses, hotels and motels, hunting and fishing camps, indoor attractions for tourists like haunted houses, fun houses, and mazes, mobile food services, observation towers, rides, games, and other activities that what you tend to find at like a festival or a fair, vacation camps, resorts, recreational rental services, and travel agents are the businesses that are going to be covered under that one. Now, we did find in the last grant that even with a list of eligible businesses, there was a lot of room for interpretation. There is a dedicated hotline for this grant, and that is where I would recommend if you are unsure, if you think you meet the other criteria, you know you didn't receive the other grant, I would highly recommend calling in to that hotline. It's available right there on the link in the portal. And they will be able to let you know if you're a business that qualifies and then go through the application process. Currently, this process is open until June 25th, and it is open as of today. So you will be able to apply now through the end of June. Next slide, please. I mentioned before rapid testing. So Ontario is a little bit on the forefront of this. We've actually gotten two, I'm going to say actually 2.5 rapid testing programs that the federal government has rolled out here in partnership with Shoppers Drug Mart, as well as some chambers of commerce across the province. So there are two ways to go about it. One, you can apply via Shoppers Drug Mart, and this link will take you to the address where that is done. If you are an eligible business, Shoppers will provide you with access to rapid testing kits of up to 25 tests per kit. Shoppers is charging a $14 handling fee, so it's going to work out to about 50 cents per test. Or if you live in a region with a participating chamber of commerce, you can pick it up from your local chamber free of charge. So this is a really positive sign. We know that, I believe the number is 63% of our businesses across the country have indicated that if rapid testing helps them open, they'd be willing to use it. We're very encouraged by the fact that the federal government and the Ontario government have recognized that there is a demand there, and they are getting those tests out at very, very low cost. Now, what we don't know yet is how they are going to tie this to reopening. We have always very much been from the position that rapid testing is the sort of thing that you should be able to use to reopen. For example, again, not taking this particularly personally, but if a hairdresser takes a rapid test and tests negative, and say I as a customer take a rapid test and test negative, we should be able to keep that appointment. And that similarly flows for gyms and one-on-one training. You can use it for retail, any kind of appointment-based clientele, which again is not the ideal. We'd much rather see businesses open to customers more broadly, but in the meantime, could be a solution to help bridge us to the point where we're getting to larger and larger capacity availability. So that continues to be the forefront. The good news is the first step is here. We are seeing the testing being rolled out, but we are waiting for the government to indicate now what the testing actually means practically on the ground, what it is to be used for, and how it's going to be, or how it's going to change the rules for businesses moving forward. I mentioned there's a bit of a halfway as well. Anybody who follows any government piece of social media will see that they are broadcasting a web portal for access to rapid testing. We are very hopeful and encouraged that as more businesses are allowed to open, that the portal will be more broadly accessible. But right now, I want to stress that portal is strictly for essential businesses. So if you're a business, you're in construction, again, you're a dry cleaner, anything on the agricultural side, if you are open and operating right now in full, you will have access to that government portal as well. If you are one of the restricted or shut down businesses like retail that's doing curbside, restaurants that are doing takeout so your kitchen is still open, that is who these Chamber and Shoppers Drug Mart programs are designed for. Again, our understanding is that the vast majority of our membership will be eligible to receive kits. The one thing I want to underscore, because government did underscore it with us on this program, is that they are not intending it to be used for office-based businesses to bring people back to the office as of yet. So if you're calling in, you're an accountant's office or a law firm or anything that deals more like my job at CFIB itself, that deals more with paperwork in an office, those businesses are not the target for this program. It's not to say that you won't get them, but because you can work from home, the government is still very much encouraging those businesses to work from home. So it is more geared towards those that are unable to operate without employees in the physical space. Again, the restaurant kitchen is a prime example. The retail store that's doing curbside is a prime example. Dog groomers, businesses like that. Next slide, please. And of course, some solid news, vaccinations. Again, I'm a bit of a hand talker. Normally you see my hands way up here. I got my shot yesterday. My left arm is a little bit toast today, but I'm happy to have gotten it. And the good news is that earlier this week, Ontario actually passed the 50% of adults vaccinated threshold province-wide. And that's extremely encouraging because as we've seen in jurisdictions that are a little bit ahead of us, the UK, Israel, once you hit that 50% marker, you do start to see a pretty precipitous decline in new cases and the hospitalizations and ICU cases that follow it. So it's encouraging that we're going this direction. I believe as of this morning, 40 and older is now available to apply through the provincial booking portal province-wide. Again, there are a number of ways to book. Make sure you're checking with your local health network, checking with your local doctor, your local pharmacies as well. But for 40 and up, province-wide, that portal is open. Next week, it'll be 30 and up, the week after, 18 and older. And again, just announced this afternoon, by May 31st, 12 and above, which has now been approved under the Pfizer rules, 12 and above will be eligible for the vaccine as well. So again, it's rolling. That number is going up, and as Laura pointed to, across the country, that number is going up. That is extremely encouraging because that is one of the key indicators that government is looking at when it comes to reopening. The quicker that we can see vaccinations go, the more people that wind up getting vaccinated, the faster that we're going to get to reopening, and the more stable reopening is going to be. Again, the last thing we want to see is a reopening only to go into another shutdown. We want to make sure that the reopening that we do is permanent, that this is the last lockdown that we have to be in. So the vaccination rollout is certainly indicating that. And again, there is some good news. And as much as I've come to really hate the phrase, I think it really is true this time that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Not as soon as we had hoped to be next week, but in the coming month or so ahead, we should have a much clearer picture of where Ontario is going to be in the late summer and early fall. And next slide, please. Finally, we do have a petitions page. It's linked right there from the PowerPoint. Our State of Ontario Businesses page is about getting businesses reopened, about leveraging rapid testing, contact tracing, the vaccination rollout to reopen businesses and to focus again on small businesses. And, again, we're not saying we need to reopen to 100% tomorrow, but let's start reopening on a capacity basis. Let's start getting people back into stores, giving them the option to get back out, start helping getting that revenue trickling again so we can really ramp up when the time comes. And then the second one there is the Ontario Support Grant Petition. Again, this grant has worked well for the specific businesses it has worked well for. If you meet the eligibility criteria cleanly, if they got your banking information cleanly, that money has come, that is positive. Far too many businesses have run into issues. Again, that call is not only our top call in Ontario, it's amongst our top calls nationally. That is how loud the concern has been around the Ontario Small Business Support Grant. It is ridiculous that businesses are still waiting in May for a program that began in June. That money has to get flowing now. The eligibility issues have to be fixed. And importantly, as we extend this lockdown again, there has to be a third payment. We know that the COVID-related debt levels in this province are extremely high. The average Ontario business is facing about $208,000 of COVID-related debt, according to our latest research. We need grant programs. We need to make sure that government supports are there so that businesses are able to reopen again when the time comes. Next slide, please. And of course, and I believe I'll bring Laura back in for this one. Yep.
Yeah, so and we'll bring all the panelists up now, and we'll take some questions. But just before we go to the questions, just a reminder, our helpline is there, so you can talk to our great counselors like Alicia, who's on our screen now, and you can also get our other counselors across Canada there, and follow us on social media. Ryan, I know, is very active on social media, as is our president. I'm there, although I'm probably less active than Ryan. But these are all good places to get information. And with that, I think what we'll do is go straight to questions. And I know some of the questions are going directly to you, Ryan. Some have come to me. Some have come to Alicia. Some have come to Corinne. So I'll throw a few out to start, and then we'll go around and I'll ask you to pick out the questions that you'd like to either put to the panel or that you'd like to answer yourself for the group. One, and this is actually for all three of you can answer this one, but Billy is raising business insurance has become a difficult issue at this point, particularly for restaurants. What are we hearing about insurance? And I know that is something we're hearing a lot about. So I don't know if Corinne or Ryan, you want to make a comment on that, or Alicia, what you're hearing on the lines?
Well, I'll start. It is something we hear about across the country, not unique to Ontario, to be fair. It tends to be concentrated in certain sectors, but it is expanding beyond certain sectors now, where businesses are struggling to either get insurance or their insurance rates have skyrocketed. We've heard 40, 50, 60% increases year over year. There's a couple of reasons for this. One is that it's what we call a hard market right now. The timing of it was terrible. We've actually talked about this on previous webinars as well, that the industry every like 10 years or so goes into what they call a hard market, where basically everyone sort of pulls back a little bit and becomes much more protective of their assets, and they don't want to necessarily take as many risks. That actually started prior to the pandemic. The pandemic has obviously made it worse. Still not an excuse. It's something that businesses can't afford right now. We've been working with the Insurance Bureau of Canada to sort of get some clarity, some tips, some ideas. We're working on actually doing a webinar soon, hopefully, on this issue with the Insurance Bureau of Canada, because we know it's becoming a bigger issue. It is an industry issue, not a government issue, so it's a bit more difficult to tackle, but it doesn't mean we don't raise it with government and ask them to sort of potentially look at this issue, because I know they're hearing it too. So you're not alone on this one, but maybe Alicia or Ryan, if you have some more practical advice to provide, such as I think there's a phone number folks can call who are really struggling to get insurance that may help. So maybe.
That's right. I would encourage the member to contact us so we can share information regarding the Insurance Bureau of Canada, which have a consumer telephone number where they can get better advice based on their needs and perhaps explore some solution that might be available to them. And in addition to that, we also have, of course, our partner Northbridge Insurance. So by calling us at our 1-888-234-2232 and listening for the option to speak to the savings team, you could, then explore perhaps, subscription through Northbridge. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. And Ryan, there's one here that you might want to comment on. Adam is asking about rent subsidies, and are there ones that the landlord should be applying to in addition to the rent subsidy he's getting as a tenant? And my answer to that is CERS is the main program, so there's no additional rent subsidy program. However, I was wondering about the property tax relief and whether tenants should be inquiring from their landlords about the Ontario property tax relief, that making sure that your landlord knows about that program, because you said it was undersubscribed, so they might not know about it, and then that might be something that should be flowing through to the tenants. And I don't know if you're hearing anything about that.
Yeah, I would absolutely recommend as a tenant that you do make your landlord aware of that program. I would also recommend as a tenant that if you are unaware, if your energy costs or your property tax are just built in to your lease payment, ask the landlord for the breakouts, and you can use those breakouts as a tenant to then apply for the rebate program. As long as you have the bills and can show that you're the one that paid them, you can apply through the portal.
Okay, that's helpful information then. So you can apply directly for the property tax relief if you are the one that paid the property taxes. Perfect.
I have a few questions related to this that I'd just like to slip in, because I think there's quite a few questions around eligibility. So Ryan, I don't know if you could talk a little bit about, Lori was asking, she's an essential business and they was able to stay open. And so are they still allowed to apply for the property tax energy cost rebates? And related to that, Linda was saying that they were also able to stay open, but they experienced significant reductions in business due to COVID. So would either of those scenarios be eligible for those rebates?
So unfortunately, no. And again, this is where we're really pressing with the government to understand that, as the Premier has said numerous times, the support needs to be there for all businesses that were affected, not just all businesses that were closed. And again, my go-to example on that is the dry cleaner. Dry cleaners have been considered essential because some safety workers may get a spill or something on a uniform and have to go in. 97% of a dry cleaner's business is office towers. The office towers have been vacant across most of Ontario for the better part of a year at this point. So dry cleaners, despite being considered essential, are effectively hung out to dry on that one. So it is something that we are trying to get across to government, that just being open does not mean that the business is doing well or thriving. I guess certainly in some sectors like grocery, so, Shoppers Drug Mart is probably not hurting these days. But realistically, we're looking to get these programs expanded. However, that is an ongoing fight. Right now, the answer, unfortunately, is no. If you're essential and open, you cannot apply for those programs.
And then one last question on the property and energy, again, two related. Is it something you have to apply for every month? And once you've applied and got it, do you have to apply every month again, or can you just get it automatically after the first month?
So it won't be automatic. But there's two ways to do it. Yes, you can apply every month. That's one way to go about it. You can also say, if you haven't applied yet, you can back apply at the same time. So if you want to apply every couple of months or sort of whatever works for you on that side, you can do. But it's not going to be automatic once you've applied. You have to keep resubmitting the bills every billing cycle.
Great. I hope that answers your question, Sridhar and Sandra, both of you asked something similar. So, all right, I'll shut up now.
Alicia, are there any questions that you've got coming into you that you want to either put to the group or answer for the webinar participants?
Absolutely, Laura. We're getting a lot of questions regarding the paid sick leave that I think would be valuable for us to just address head on, because I'm getting repeated questions. So Michelle, for example, asked us, sick days are COVID related only, not just sick days. So that's a great distinction. It is in fact COVID-19 related. Things as, we're going to get a vaccine, we're dealing with the aftermath of a vaccine, we're sick ourselves, we're waiting for a test, we're self-isolating. Perhaps we're caring for someone that has COVID. And I also want to underscore that employers have a responsibility every day prior to the onset of the shift of an employee to do the employee mandatory screening. And in the employee mandatory screening, there are additional sort of questions than just symptoms that would direct the employer to direct the employee to essentially self-isolate and communicate with Public Health, Telehealth Ontario, their physician, to determine testing. And by the very nature of directing the employee to go home because they're not passing the screening questionnaire, that triggers the payment of the leave. So that's a very important point, because if we go on the ontario.ca page, that's not necessarily, being very clear. And I am seeing this type of inquiry coming up a lot on our helpline. So very important to have the updated employee screening questionnaire. If you don't, please contact us, 1-888-234-2232. It's been updated as of early March, sorry.
I'll jump in on the sick days side of things too. I have a question coming in asking, and Alicia, feel free to answer. What if staff qualifies for more than $200 a day for the paid sick day? How do you go about paying that?
Right. So the requirement under the worker income protection benefit is to pay for what the employee would have missed that day, but the reimbursement is only up to $200. So there's a bit of a caveat here. Often I'm hearing on the helpline in recent weeks, is this the formula, such as the public holiday pay formula? No, it's really a reflection of the hourly rate of the employee and the hours that were missed. And sometimes that can be difficult. The shift may vary from one day to the next. You really want to, assess what the employee would have worked that day, because if, the employee's unhappy, you could make a claim and you would be asked to substantiate that. So be mindful of that. Absolutely.
And I will add to,
if there's a gap between the $200 and what they would have made, the employer has to make up that gap. Is that what you're saying?
No. So if there's a gap, and it's Jasmine who asked the question, if there is a gap, you are legally required to pay up to $200. That's what you'll be reimbursed for. As an employer, you can choose to pay, say if they made $250 a day, you can choose to pay that $50, but as long as you don't have any pre-existing sick day conditions in an employee contract, you're not required to pay above $200. If it's below $200, you have to match it. If it's above $200, it's then up to the employer to determine whether or not they want to match it.
Thank you for that clarification, Ryan. That's an important one. I'm sure you're getting lots of questions on that, Alicia.
We are. I'm also getting some question regarding WSIB. So I think some of our members may not have a mandatory requirement to be enrolled with WSIB. We call that a compulsory enrollment. So they may have a by application, meaning they can choose to enroll with WSIB or not. And so some of those members, I think, are concerned, well, am I going to be eligible to get that reimbursement? And the answer to that is yes. So we have that confirmation that it's only sort of a portal, a means to get the reimbursement. There is no requirement to be actively registered with WSIB. And also another question that I'm seeing is, will this affect my premium? And the answer to that is also no.
Great. Ryan, you, I'm sure, have a pile of questions there that you're wanting to get to.
Yeah, so just one other thing on sick days. Someone asked if someone's only taking a couple hours off to get the vaccine, is it broken out into hours or is that considered a full day? That is considered a full day. There are no half days. You don't have to count, up to 7.5 or 8 hours for the day. If they are taking any time off under the provision, it does count as a full day. Another question that I'm coming in around capacity limits when we get there from a hairstylist, asking about what 25% means capacity. Does it mean only 25% of your staff can work at a time, or is it based on square footage of the space? It is going to be based on square footage of the space. That is spelled out in the government restrictions. If you go to our website, CFIB-FCEI, on the Ontario page, we do have a direct link to the color code. It's not currently in effect because we are under the province-wide shutdown, but when it does come back, there is a formula there. So if you had say a 1,600 square foot salon space, 25%, math, about 400 square feet. So the number of employees that would fit on the 400 would be the limitation there. I'll also note, when you have a percent capacity restriction in Ontario below 100, and this is important, you are required to post your capacity on the outside of the business. There are a number of things at this point, to the point where I think some stores may be papered up with government required signage, but you do have to post what your capacity is outside so that the public, or from the government's point of view, an inspector has an understanding of how many people are supposed to be in there when they are coming around.
Mm-hmm. I also received a question here from Tom Wetland with regards to the interaction of the Ontario Paid Sick Day Program and the federal Canada Recovery Sickness Benefits. So asking, the Ontario Sick Day Program is in addition to the federal mandatory sick day program, and that would be correct in the sense that from the onset, if an employee misses work, you would cover it through the paid program, provincial paid program here. And if an employee continues to need to self-isolate, is sick, then once they've missed 50% of their scheduled work week, that triggers the ability to apply to the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit, which provides $500 weekly for up to 4 work week. And so that would be the complement. Of course, I want to remind our members that after 7 days of interruption of earning, let's not forget to issue a record of employment. There's specific rules with regards to the ROE, particularly if you're paying sick leave. I would encourage you to contact us for further details.
So Ryan, a couple of follow-ups on the property tax rebate one. One quick one from Christy, is that property rebate only for business property taxes, or would residential taxes be eligible? I'm guessing there's a separate program maybe for residential, but
yeah, it's commercial only.
Commercial only, okay. And then Adam was asking, and I'm not sure about this, but if that was already, if he's basically getting the property tax portion through the CERS program, can he claim it again through the provincial program? My guess is no, they don't tend to like the double dipping kind of, or they see that as sort of claiming the same thing twice, but I don't know if you have any additional intel on that.
Yeah, so I will note the government's aware that it's a problem, and they, rather than trying to find a solve for that federally and provincially, they're sort of learning to live with it. They discourage you. There is like it's not like a bright flashing disclaimer, but you are discouraged from doing it. However, the government is aware in some cases you may be doing it, not being aware that you're doing it. that may be happening by accident. So they're not going to claw back or go after any of those payments, but they do discourage, if you know you're getting those payments from one program, namely from the federal program, not to go in and double dip on the provincial side.
On the other hand, if you're, not getting the help you need from other parts of the provincial programs, you might make your own call on that. So, so hopefully that gives you the information you need there. Other questions, Corinne? Do you have any more in your pile you want to get to?
So I'm not sure this was answered because I was busy answering questions, but Sandra was asking, will WSIB rates increase due to employees taking sick days?
The answer to that is
we asked the government, like day of, we went straight to the chair of the WSIB to ask that exact question. We have worked hard with them to get those rates to where they are, to make sure the unfunded liability was paid off, which it was a couple of years ago. Unequivocally, no, WSIB rates are not to go up because of this program. The best way to look at it is the WSIB is administering this program. The program is not coming from them. So this is separate money. It's not premiums that are funding it. It's the government has just asked them to run it. But we'll be watching closely, of course. September is when they have their AGM, and we will be, keeping an eye to make sure. But the answer that we got from WSIB, from Minister McNaughton at Labour, is absolutely not. WSIB rates should not move because of this program.
Okay, and unrelated question, but another one that's more for you and Alicia is, do you know of any support specific to sport organizations or any increase to the capacity limits for sport facilities when we go back to the color codes?
So not yet at this time, nothing specific yet either. And based on the criteria for the tourism and hospitality grant, I don't think the eligibility is going to be there either. We have heard this from a number of businesses in the space, and I will note I did get a question from someone who does it more on the kids side, not the adult sports side, but on the kids side. It is somewhere we're looking for the government to help. It's one of the absentee areas from government support on the province's side, but there are no existing programs right now to get it back in place at the provincial level.
So
I've got another
ahead.
question. Just speaking of support, a couple of questions on the Ontario Small Business Support Grant. So first, unfortunately, if you had not applied by April 8th, the application portal is currently closed. We are trying to get it reopened, but right now there's no avenue to apply. Number of people are asking about corrections. Again, please call Alicia. Give us a call at our hotline, your authorization number and your phone number. I can't guarantee anything, but we do have routes where we can escalate this. We have had success on those for these exact issues, but that really is the way to go. You can go through the email, general government email, the general government hotline. Again, every bit of feedback we've got is that they are at best slow and at worst entirely unresponsive. We do have some additional avenues we can go through, but again, give us a call, give us your phone number, your authorization number on your application, and we can help move things forward.
Great. Well, I'll just maybe start wrapping us up with some final questions and comments from everyone. So if there's some additional questions that you want to put in, you can do so now. And I'm going to start with you, Corinne, but I'll just put in a couple of federal questions. It's just a comment from Ed on how crazy it is that they would be decreasing the revenue multipliers for CERS and SUs. And I know that's something you're working on. So I've already responded to Ed, but I just thought that would be good for everybody to know that. And then there was a question on rent relief and whether CECRA, whether there'd be any chance that there would be, help for those whose landlords didn't participate in the first rent relief program, which was the acronym for that was CECRA. And unfortunately, and Corinne, you might have some more color commentary on this, but we keep asking for it for sure. We're not done knocking on that door, but it doesn't look good, does it, on that one? I mean, they seem pretty, that of all of the things we're asking for, and we sort of have a sense of which ones we're more hopeful on and which ones we're less hopeful on. I would say we're going to keep asking because our job is to increase the odds of success every day on getting that done for you. But my feeling is that's in the less hopeful bucket, and I just thought you could maybe add some color commentary on the federal programs either of those comments.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. There are so many things we could do to improve all these programs. And like Laura said, it really is about gauging what's possible and what may not be possible. So certainly the secret piece of it, we continue to sort of raise it. It's less likely they're going to open the doors on that, but what it does help us do is potentially open up things going forward that maybe wouldn't otherwise be, because we can guilt them essentially into the fact that secret didn't work for so many small businesses. And I also have a few comments about the subsidy going down and being worried about the wage and rent subsidies going down. One is somebody from the event industry saying, we're not going to be back up and running by summer. It's not going to happen, right? So, and we hear you. And so I want to thank everybody who's given us that feedback, because that's it's important for us to know. And I think we've already started talking about, okay, we got to build a strategy around this, and we got to start pushing back on government to make them realize that things are not in any place. We're almost in June, and most of the country, or a lot of the country, is still very much in restricted mode. So maybe it's still too early. So I think that is definitely going to be on our radar for the next little bit. So I'll just mention a couple of things, if that's okay, Laura. Also, Ed asked about the HASCAP loan. Is it just a loan still? Yes, it's just a loan. And he talked about who wants to take on more debt. Get that. We hear that a lot. And we are raising that. I would say that is something we're quite focused on, is trying to get government to provide more forgivable portions of either the Canada Emergency Business Account loan, or add a forgivable portion to this HASCAP loan. Because we've heard from many of our members that they're interested, but they just can't take on more debt. So if there's a way that more debt can be forgiven, and I had some other questions about that as well, that would be super helpful. So it is very much on our radar to sort of lobby government. We've been doing it through the pre-budget process. We're going to continue now as well going forward. That as part of any kind of recovery, we have to figure out how to help so many small businesses get out from under the debt they've had to build throughout the pandemic. So definitely on our radar screen, and one that we're working on for sure. I wanted to just mention those two things.
Great. Okay, and do you want to wrap up, Corinne, with your comments? Sure. And then I'll go around with final questions and comments that the other that for Alicia and Ryan.
Yeah, so again, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. I know there is a lot going on. The news that Ryan shared today is not the best news at all. And I live in Ontario too, so I feel the pain, I see the pain, and I please know that we're going to continue to do everything we can provincially and federally to try to get our economy back up and running as soon as it's safely to do so. And we do think there are ways that can be done, which I think Ryan has already started to allude to. But we're always here. Alicia and her colleagues across the country are happy to do whatever they can to help you through. So please give them a call. We have some great folks right across the country and in here in Ontario who can do that for you. And finally, I always like to put a pitch in. I haven't done this in a while, to fill out our surveys. We have certainly surveys coming out in the next little bit on the COVID, but also on some other topics that are starting to become important too. And the more feedback we get from you, the more ability we have to pressure government to move forward on a number of initiatives. And to be clear, government has also come to value our research more than they ever have before through this COVID crisis. And I think so your voice can be heard, and that survey process is another way that we can get that in front of the government. So thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Corinne. Alicia, any last questions you want to put out and wrap up comments you want to make as we kind of wind down now?
Sure, thanks, Laura. There are a number of questions that I haven't been able to answer, but I will answer the member and follow up. Perhaps one that came in that is interesting and that I think it touched on something that is quite important, which is employer paid leave, and comes from Sheila saying, just to clarify on sick days, the employee has used their 2 paid sick days before April 19th and normally is paid $300 for their sick day. Do we have to pay them the $300 for COVID-related sick days after April 19th, or only the $200? So that date is really crucial, April 19th. If you were offering a paid sick leave, that is at least equal or greater than the mandatory paid sick leave, then you should be fine. But it's very important to keep that date of April 19th, because if an employee has used up all of her sick days provided by their employer as of April 19th, then you have to honor 3 additional paid sick days. And in terms of, you know, would the $300 be max, or would it be $200? I would encourage you to call in so we can perhaps explore your own workplace policy with regards to paid sick leave and see if there's, you know, a mandatory requirement for you to offer up to that amount. But just a lot of nuances. So I guess in closing, I just want to really strongly encourage our members to call us. It's always a pleasure for us to assist you. There are a ton of different nuances, layers in employee and employer relationship. There's also an unpaid infectious disease emergency leave that is still ongoing with no end date in sight. It would only be once government deemed it COVID not to be an infectious disease, and it's job protected. So we really want to be careful about disciplinary action or termination could be considered a reprisal. So please contact us. We're a great team and we'd love to take your question. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alicia. Ryan, I'm going to go to you. We're still frantically trying to answer last questions here.
Yeah, it's always great to talk to everyone again, and I truly hope that one day my name being attached to a webinar is not going to kind of be like the Grim Reaper, and you go like, oh boy, what does Ontario have to say? I swear there's going to be good news eventually. We will get back there, but in the meantime, really and truly, I mean, it's tough walking down Main Street these days and seeing, you know, the number of shops with windows closed and, you know, darkened stores or papered up windows and walls. So just a very much heartfelt thank you for doing what you do, for continuing to do what you do. And please, as Alicia and Corinne have already noted, do not hesitate to call in, to let us know what you're hearing, to ask questions. It informs everything we do. It helps us bring back what's on the ground to government so that they are hearing what your concerns are. So please give us a call and let us know.
Thanks so much, Ryan, and thanks to those who, to my colleagues on the screen. I'll just read you Heather's comment, because I know this puts a lot of pep in your step, and mine too. She says, thank you for your diligence and support. My CFIB membership has been my #1 best investment through these last 2 years. And so thank you, Heather, for sharing that, because that's why we're here, essentially. And so I'll wrap up with my comments. Thanks to all of you out there. You really are, business owners across Canada are our heroes, but we often, when we're talking, we have an extra special place in our hearts right now for those business owners in Ontario who have been just whacked by this in terms of the restrictions and the shutdowns. And we are going to continue to fight for you, obviously, and just maybe, I guess my last piece would be to lean on those words of wisdom about making sure you're finding that inspiration daily. It's not a one and done thing, but looking for places to find that hope and inspiration. And if you need to talk to us, we said this on the Atlantic and Quebec webinar earlier today, that you know, sometimes you just need a place to talk, and our business counselors are happy to just talk to you. And if you need to talk to them about things you can't tell your customers or your suppliers or your staff, you know, they're always there to listen. So there was a member who commented on that, and I just wanted to reflect back that we always love hearing from you, and we're in your corner, and we'll keep fighting for you. And we'll look forward to the next webinar. We're heading into the weekend now, so I wish everyone, I mean, not now exactly, it's Thursday, it's Friday's Eve, but as we head into that, time, I hope everybody gets some fresh air and some chance to rejuvenate over the weekend. And with that, we'll see you soon. We'll let you know when our next webinars are. We always love your feedback, so if you've got topic ideas or you want to have more of this regional focus, let us know. And you know where to find us. The phone number's there. And we're over and out for today's webinar, Alexa, but we'll see you all soon.